I stayed in a duplex on the res. My next door neighbor talks to herself. Now mind you, she does live alone, and sometimes I hear her talking in different voices and screaming. And trust me, it's not her TV. There's also scratching on the wall between my bedroom and her place. I swear, even sometimes at night when I'm in bed, it's almost like I hear her whispering or trying to grab my attention. All of this eventually stopped after it went on for such a long time. A few days ago at night, I was in my room and I heard footsteps in the hall and the living room. I thought it was my daughter. Then I heard something slam on the ground, so I went out to see what was going on. We do have a gate because we have a new puppy, but it was on the ground like someone or something picked it up and slammed it on the ground. And you guessed it, nobody was home except me. I didn't think anything of it. I'm used to small things like that happening. So I go to my bedroom, lay down, and read some scary stories. Why? Because I love scary stories. That's when my lights go off, which is actually pretty common living in this area. The whole neighborhood has complained. Apparently it's whenever somebody plugs in something that requires a lot of electricity. But this time, when the lights turn off, I also hear 3 knocks behind me. I hadn't heard my neighbor in a while, so I assumed that she was just communicating. Hey, the lights are off again. After about 10 minutes, the lights came on. After I finished reading, I decided to jump in the shower. The lights turned off on me. I felt very scared, like a kid again. And mind you, I don't scare that easily. Quickly jumped out, and when I did, there was knocking on the wall again. The lights then turned on, so I just ended up knocking back. When I did, I swear, I hear what sounds like somebody laughing. Fuck that. I ended up smudging just to be on the safe side. Nothing else happened after that. However, my mom woke me up at 3 a.m. She had called me. She said that she saw the tall man last night, the one with the trench coat and the hat, and that he was walking down the street. That's when I told my mom about the neighbor, and she said that maybe that woman is into witchcraft or possessed or something. She told me to smudge and pray and to make plans to leave that house. She also told me not to be scared, that that's what they feed off of. I know it's easier said than done, but it's hard not to be scared. Nothing else happened for the next few days, because I sure as hell wasn't gonna stick around and find out. And we did end up moving the next weekend. So just be safe if you live in a duplex or apartment and you start hearing some noises in between the walls. For some people, love can be a fickle thing. In some cases, people fall in love with someone early on in their lives. It could be in high school or college, and they stay with that person for decades. I admire those people. For others, it can take quite a bit longer to finally find that perfect match. Sadly, some people never seem to succeed in that aspect, though for the most part, by the time that people are ready to settle down and have kids and start a family, they have found that special someone. During my last semester in college, I met somebody. I had arrived to one of my classes a bit too early. Even though the class seemed empty, the door was unlocked. So I figured I'd let myself in and wait for everyone else to get there. When I cracked open the door, I noticed that I wasn't actually the first one. There was somebody else already waiting in the far corner of the room. She glanced over at me when I entered and gave a forced smile in my direction. I returned it and sat in some empty seat nearby. Time went by slowly, and I decided to pass the time by scrolling through my social media on my phone. I glanced over at the girl a few minutes later, and I saw that she happened to be doing the same thing as me. It wasn't long after that I noticed how much time had passed since her and I had been sitting there. I was beginning to wonder where the other students were, as well as the professor. I navigated my phone to my emails and waited for them to update. There was a notification from my professor stating that, due to some unfortunate circumstances, the class was not going to be held today. She must have not seen the email, I thought. I stood up and walked over. She looked up from her phone. I told her that I had received an email about this class being canceled and asked her if she had received the same thing. A look of surprise washed over her face as she quickly went through her phone. A few seconds later, she confirmed that she had also received the email and stated that she felt like an idiot. I told her that I felt the same way, and she just returned a defeated laugh. I introduced myself and asked her for her name. She told me it was Sarah. I asked her if she didn't have anywhere else to be, if she wanted to grab some lunch with me. There was a sandwich place a short walk away from the school. She looked at me suspiciously for a few moments, then she agreed. We walked, ate lunch, talked about our lives, then returned to school. Sarah and I started dating shortly after that. I'm not really sure why, but we clicked right away, and from that moment, we were always together. We did everything: movies, dinners, get-togethers, you name it. After around 4 months, she asked me to move into the apartment she was at. I did hesitate a bit. Moving in with someone is a pretty big step in a relationship, and not one to be taken lightly. I found myself wondering if that would be the straw that would break our relationship. Regardless, I wanted to be with her, and I wanted to make this work. So, I accepted it. I started to move in a few days later, and to be quite honest, I couldn't have been happier. 2 months later, we both graduated college and started working full-time. Ironically, even though I had a degree in computer science, most places that were hiring wanted years of experience, which I didn't have. I ended up working as a rent-a-cop at a strip mall while Sarah, who had gotten a degree in business, was hired on at some logistics company. Even though I felt less, she never once looked down on me or treated me any less than herself. I was grateful. The months started to fly by, and even though my work situation wasn't the best, I was still very happy with my life. Then, one day, Sarah didn't come home from work for about 4 hours after her shift. After the first hour, I tried calling and texting her, but I didn't receive a response. 2 hours passed by and I was about to call the police when she finally texted me back. She said a work meeting ran late and that she was now on her way home. I apologized for blowing up her phone, and she told me it was fine. The days that followed, Sarah had gotten into the habit of coming home well past the end of her shift. At first, I wasn't really concerned. I just thought she was having a rough week or two at work. Then one evening, after she had gotten home, she jumped into the shower as I was watching TV in bed. She had tossed her phone on the bed next to me, and I thought nothing of it. Now, I should mention, I'm not one of those overbearing, snooping boyfriends. I try not to go looking for trouble if I can avoid it. Plus, I honestly didn't have a reason to suspect anything. But then her phone buzzed and illuminated next to me. She had received a text from a random number. I glanced over at her phone and read the message. The text said, "I hope to see you again soon." That was strange. If that was somebody from her work, why would they send that when they see her every day? A few more days had gone by since then, and to my surprise, Sarah had been coming home at a normal time after work. I reassured myself that I was just overreacting. Then, a week later, it started up again. She started coming home later and later. During one of those days, I contacted one of her coworkers, a friend who works in the same department. I sent her a message and asked her if her and Sarah were in a meeting at work. What she sent back increased my suspicions tenfold. She said everyone left work hours ago. Nobody had stayed behind. I thanked her before letting the thoughts get to me for a few minutes. I was assuming the worst. Sarah had finally gotten fed up with me, and she found somebody better. But I thought we were both happy. that our lives, even though imperfect, were still enjoyable, and that our relationship wasn't dull. I decided that since I had the following day off work, I was gonna follow Sarah. I wasn't sure what I would do if I actually caught her in the act with somebody else, but I needed to know. I waited outside her work until her shift ended, and slowly but surely, everyone from her office building began pouring out into their cars. Then, I saw Sarah exit. She rushed over to her car, hopped in, and began driving away in the opposite direction of our apartment. I began following her from a distance, trying to make sure that she wouldn't spot me and recognize the car. She had gotten onto the highway for around 20 minutes before exiting into the industrial sector of our city. She finally stopped her car near the back of an old worn-down warehouse. Wondering if this was the spot of a romantic meetup, I got out of the car and tiptoed over to the building. After trying unsuccessfully to peek through one of the dirt-covered windows, I spied a nearby fire escape. I climbed the ladder and found the door at the top to be unlocked. I cracked the door slightly, and right away I could hear people speaking inside. I opened it a bit further and stepped onto a catwalk inside the building before quickly shutting the door behind me. I peered over the railing, and what I saw gave me shivers. Sarah was standing near a group of people. They were all wearing a mask of a random animal. Sarah as well, but I could still recognize her by her clothing. A man was wearing the mask of a bear, while saying something that sounded like a prayer. They all joined hands briefly, before two of them broke off and walked to a dark area of the warehouse. Muffled shouts began to fill the room as I watched the two from before drag a man into the light and throw him to the ground. The group of disguised individuals all lowered their heads upon the man as he started to beg through his binds. As I leaned in for a closer look, a loose pipe from the catwalk came free and fell to the ground below. The clattering metal rang out, and in one quick motion, all the masked individuals looked up at me. I quickly turned and ran out the door. I slid down the fire escape, falling into the dirt below. I then scrambled to my feet and ran to my car. I sped out the area without even looking back. During the drive home, a million things were going through my head. Who the fuck were those people? Why was Sarah with them? And who was that man? And what were they gonna do to him? I made it home and packed up as much stuff that I could. I decided it would be best to get a hotel room before I try to figure this stuff out. Once I felt safe in the hotel room, I made a random tip to the police about the warehouse, though I'm not sure if they ever found anything, because Sarah contacted me about an hour or two later, telling me that she was home and asking me where I was. I stayed at the hotel for a few days. During that time, I sent a message to Sarah, and I told her that my mom had gotten sick and that I had to leave to go see her. I didn't receive a reply. I did end up making a trip back to her apartment, and I found it completely empty. I asked management if they knew what happened. They said that Sarah had paid off the remainder of her rent, had a bunch of people pack up her stuff, and she left. At this point, I have more questions than answers. I feel like Sarah knows that I was there that night. These past few days, I can't seem to shake the feeling that somebody is watching me. My cousin is a heavy drinker, and he told me that demons are visiting him, and they're also talking to him. I kind of laughed a bit when he told me this, because he said it like nothing, and I thought he was joking. But then he asked me if I wanted to know how they walk. That's when he looked at me dead serious and asked me if I wanted to know. It creeped me out a bit, so I told him no, and to stop drinking so much. I don't know if some of you all will believe this one, but this happened about 3 years ago. I remember it was Saturday night. It was starting to get a bit dark. I was home alone. My mom and dad were busy somewhere doing something. I had nothing to do. I cleaned up my room, the kitchen, basically the whole house. So I texted my cousin. I asked him what he was up to, and he said nothing, that he was just drinking, like always. I told him that he should come by. He said he would pick me up in my uncle's truck. I ended up calling my mom, telling her that I was going to hang out with my cousin. I remember she said to be back before dark. I said, alright. Now I do want to say this. At this time, I used to also drink heavy. About 30 minutes later, my cousin picked me up. I got everything that I needed. We drove out towards Toyog because we had nowhere to go. We went on the dirt roads, and I don't know if any one of you know about that old jail that's by those big rocks. We went over there, we parked, and we started drinking. He had a 12-pack of Bud Light and 3 bottles of Jack Daniel's Tennessee Fire. I was sitting on the tailgate, a little bit buzzed. I could feel it. Yeah, we were just casually talking and laughing, having a good time. This is when he asked me if I ever wonder how they walk. I remember laughing, asking who. And he said something along the lines of, the ones who dance and walk. I then looked up at him confused. And that's when I noticed about a mile away, walking behind him, this figure, walking towards us. Now remember, by now it's getting pretty dark. So I figured it was just somebody randomly walking, I guess. I didn't say nothing. I didn't want to seem like I was really drunk, or I would have freaked them out. So I just left it. That's when my cousin said that he was just fucking with me, that they don't happen to walk. It's like those people who see a handprint and claim that it's a ghost. Is it even possible for a ghost to leave footprints? I nodded and just shook my head. Well, he did have a point. This time when I looked up at him, he started semi-dancing, but I also noticed this figure was now closer. I couldn't really distinguish it, but I figured I was just tripping, so I took a shot of the bottle. It was right beside me. When I looked up at him, I scratched my eyes, and this thing was right behind him. I say thing because I swear, everything happened so fast. For a split second, I swear it had the face of a goat. In my head, I was like, what the fuck? Its face was white, but it also had red on it, feathers and stuff. I picked up the bottle and threw it at him. My cousin moved just in time, and I blacked out after I threw the bottle. My face ended up hitting first on the ground. I woke up in the truck with him as we were getting pretty close back home. I had a busted lip and also a bruise on the top of my head. I remember my cousin saying that I couldn't even hang. He told me that I was seeing things, and then I passed out, and that was enough for me. I did stop drinking for about a year. After that, I fell back into the addiction. Even worse, I was with my cousin again, drinking and everything else. We got done partying, then we went to go drop off some girls. After that, we went towards the back roads from Farmington to Shiprock. While he was driving, I dropped my phone on the passenger's floor. I went to pick it up. That's when I found a small pistol. I'm not sure what kind it was. I forgot what he told me, so I picked it up and asked if it was his. He said yes, and he said he was going to show me how it works. He put the bullets in, loaded it. This guy then pulls the trigger to see if the safety was on. It wasn't. 2 shots went close to my head. I bounced back. I told him to pull the fuck over, and I told him what the fuck was he doing, that he almost shot me. He apologized. After that, we went back to Shiprock, and he dropped me off. It was crazy. Looking back, he was going deeper down this path. I was angry at the shit that he pulled, and I didn't even want to talk to him for a while. I found out the next few days that he had committed suicide. I had to deal with the guilt that maybe I had caused it, but after talking, and some therapy as well, I realized that it wasn't me. and that maybe he was facing something else, battling something else from all the drinking. Personally, that's why I just don't drink anymore. If you need a drink to have fun, you should evaluate yourself. Maybe there's some bigger issues going on. I've been on this road of recovery for a while now, and it hasn't been easy, and I have been tempted. But I guess this is part of the process. All I know is that this path is better than the road that I was going down. Do y'all think my cousin was dealing with something else? Or maybe something was after him? I used to be a security guard for the Vancouver film industry. One very popular filming location is a mental institution. It's Riverview or Riverside. Don't remember now. Anyways, you seen this place in Untold Stories, Deadpool 2, and the orphanage part in Grave Encounters, movies like that. The thing is, all the places in Grave Encounters are basically just like the movie. There's literally a long dark underground tunnel that they would use to transport patients, supplies, and other stuff when the place was active. It's actually super creepy, and just as creepy as it is in the movie. Also, a side note, it was where hydroshock therapy was developed in Canada, and they were using it on veterans from one of the wars. Patients back in the day were treated terrible, but before its closing, it was made into an actual modern medical psychiatric facility. So this place was literally beautiful during the day. They brought plants and trees and flowers from all over to help the patients keep calm and for outdoor therapy. So much so that on my first day there, I would go around the grounds a bit and go through the buildings. I forgot to mention that the place is pretty big, bigger than the university campus that I went to, with several buildings and many patient facilities. So on my first night shift, nothing really happened. My second one, nothing. All these nights I worked there, nothing really happened. Some of the other guards would say that they didn't like the building or that they got a bad feeling there. But me, I loved it. One hot summer night though, I see a June bug for the first time. They're very uncommon here, but I imagine it's because there may be a colony living here that got brought with trees or flora back in the day. Not too weird. But then they started diving to me, like 6 or 7 of them. I was a little grossed out, but I took a picture and sent it to my wife to figure out what they were. And in that time, I smacked and killed one. I called her on the phone, all amused, and said, "Wow, the other ones are eating it." She told me that they don't always eat bugs, but sure enough, these bugs were just mowing down on their fallen compadre. It was gross, but I didn't think too much of it. I got in my car and did up the windows. That night, the motion sensors in the building flipped on almost my entire 12-hour shift, not in sequence like somebody was walking from one place to another. It would be like top left, bottom middle floor. It seemed random at first, but now I wish I knew Morse code back then. Weeks later, I go inside the building at night to do a round. Nothing really happened, except that my skin had goosebumps from the moment that I walked in. It was like something was watching me and breathing down my neck, and my fight or flight sense was going crazy for no reason. I remember the anxiety I felt that time. It was like someone just poured dry ice into my veins. Goosebumps on my skin so bad it almost hurt. Every part of me was screaming that something was wrong. I remember going outside to a beautiful, hot summer night and asking myself out loud, "The fuck is wrong with me?" And I started to think that maybe this is why some of the other guards hated working there. And it just escalated from there. For a while at night, I was seeing things at the corner of my eyes, always in my peripherals. It would move and slither and dart away from my flashlight. Some nights, going inside the building, I had just bad vibes, sadness, or that cold fight or flight response, which, by the way, would now happen even outside the building. I would just tell myself that I'm grown and I need to get a grip. But this was like non-stop. I always kept my flashlight on because the lights would always fail in some rooms, especially the ones that I'm about to walk into, or if I'm already inside. I told myself it's simply an old building, but looking back, this felt targeted, like it was waiting until the door closed and then turning off. Working a few seconds later, or even the next time I came through that doorway, it still went further. Doors started slamming down hallways that I wasn't in, disembodied whispering. To be honest, I no longer like coming to work. I put myself through this, literally telling myself that I had to, because I had to overcome my fear of it. Then one night, I stopped going in at all. I just stayed in my car and just watched the building as I was listening to comedy on the Slacker radio. I had full bars and good reception and everything else. Now I'm starting to hear those sounds, the ones that I heard inside, through my phone speaker. It really freaked me out. After a couple of nights of this, it goes crazy again. In the middle of a stand-up comedian's joke, there's a bunch of voices, but it all sounds like bad static. I ripped the earbuds out and started tearing up. I was a grown man at this point, but I don't think I had ever cried in fear before. I couldn't believe what was happening, like I was actually in denial of it. Within seconds of the earbuds coming out, it stopped. I didn't actually want to believe what I heard. I didn't want to ever hear those sounds again. I didn't want it to be real. I could tell myself in that moment it was just static, and if I put my earbuds back in and it didn't happen, it was over, and it wasn't real. And I was listening over data on cell phone. I don't know how they work, but I didn't even know they could get static. So I put my earbuds back in. Like all of this happened in about 10 seconds, and I literally have tears in my eyes, like hoping that this didn't happen so that I could tell myself it was all in my head. My comedy is back. The joke is finishing, and then it all happens again. I pull my headphones out, and it's coming out of my phone speaker too. At this point my blood is running cold. Just typing this out again is giving me anxiety. I'm most likely not gonna sleep tonight now. I closed Slacker radio, and it kept going. I panicked and held down the power button on my phone. The screen goes black. The phone powers off. It still continues to go. It smells horrible in my car now for some reason. I can't even describe it, but accurate and rotting garbage. And it stinks to my nostrils. I fumble with the battery and remove it. Then the sound stops. Finally. After a few minutes, I put the battery back in. I power on my phone, and I ended up calling my wife. She did help me calm down. I know I scared the hell out of her, and she most likely had never heard me scared like that before. And honestly, I haven't been that scared since. I remember getting out of the car with her on the phone, because I had to move on. I can't explain why, but it felt like I had to get far away. And being trapped in the car was dangerous, like my brain just screaming, run. But back to the sound. I should mention that I'm not religious, and after all of this was about the closest that I ever came to becoming religious. Once I was calmed down enough to be in control again, I opened the car door and kind of poked my head in. The smell was gone. I got in, pulled the vehicle as far away from the building as I could, chain smoked the rest of my shift in silence. I was on the phone with my wife. She was also working. And then I finally went home. Now this last part is the most fucked up. I drove home from the shift and I went directly to bed. And my wife shook me awake furious. She was like, "Why would you even do that? What the fuck is wrong with you?" And I, confused and half asleep, said, "What's going on?" So she told me later that she was so mad because she wanted me to laugh or be like, "I got you," or whatever, but was angry out of fear when she realized that I had no idea what she was talking about. She went white as a sheet. and told me that I had to come look at something. I basically said like, I gotta go back to sleep, but she persisted, and once I was awake enough to realize that she was sincerely terrified, I ended up going with her outside to the carport. "Did you do this?" she demanded, sounding pissed off again, and pointing at the rear passenger side window of the car, which we both used. There was a 6-finger handprint that was super dirty on the window, with fingers that were way too long. I remember I tried to rub it off and was about to get angry at her when I realized that she was still terrified. I love my wife. She is not a good liar and has never had a reason to. We only ever spoke about this a few times, and she has never been comfortable with it. I know that she didn't make that handprint, but back to rubbing it off though. It didn't come off. She then said, "Did someone that you work with do this?" I said, "I was alone last night, you know that." While she was basically demanding that I admit to making the creepy ass handprint, that's when I realized the handprint was inside the car. Something put its hand on the window from behind me. While inside of my car, I had a mini panic attack again, just imagining what the hell would leave something like that. We cleaned it off, and the paper towel smelled like sewage, rotting garbage. And at this point, I couldn't leave it in the garbage. We were both crazy with anxiety and fear over what happened, and I knew that she finally believed me. We burned the paper towel in the backyard. She called in sick and stayed with me as I finally got some sleep, and I try not to go insane over what happened. And that's the biggest thing that's happened to me. I never went near the buildings again, and it seems to have left me alone. I'm Navajo and part Mandan Hidatsa, Dakota natives for those who don't know. I live in Utah. My family never mentioned skinwalkers or witches to me, so I knew nothing about them. My grandpa died just before the summer, so my parents sent me to live with my grandma to help her around her land. For company, I brought my cat with me. He was an orange tabby. We had only been there 2 weeks when my cat went missing. I figured that he would come back, but he never did. I called him and looked for him. Nothing. Some days later, I was bringing some hay out behind the barn to the horse corral when something orange grabbed my attention. It was the remains of my cat. By the looks of it, he was attacked by something. Maybe a coyote. They're all around here. However, when I picked it up, I used a pitchfork. I noticed right away that there was no bones. It was just a pile of skin and fur. But I also noticed that there were small splotches of what seemed to be red, yellow, and white paint. At first I thought that maybe he had gotten into something, but the way the paint was on his fur, if you told me someone had put it there on purpose, I'm not sure you would be wrong. Even though there wasn't much left to him, I loved him and was heartbroken. So I put his remains in a wood box that my grandmother had in the barn and buried him behind a hill. I marked his final resting spot with a nice stone that I found, and so that everyone would know that he was there. I painted his name and also put the date in some neat white letters and numbers. Only a couple of nights later, I was hearing some cat sounds outside the hogan and something scratching at the door. My grandmother doesn't have any other cats, and I don't remember seeing any hanging around the ranch. I go over and open the door, or at least look out, and every time that I do, there's nothing. After a couple of nights of this, I decided that in the morning I'll go check on my cat's grave. When I got out to the hill, I saw that the stone was still in place, and nothing looked disturbed, but something told me it wasn't right. I went back to the barn for a shovel, and came back and carefully dug up the grave. I removed the box, and before I opened it up, I ended up saying a little prayer when I took off the lid. You can imagine my surprise when his fur and skin were gone, and instead, the box contained his bones. At least, I assumed they were his. I couldn't believe it. I know for a fact that when I buried that box, it was with fur and skin, and not a bone in sight. I wish I could say that this incident was the only strange thing that I experienced while living there. Now that I have talked to several people, basically I learned that skinwalkers communicate with spirits, and from these spirits, they obtain the ability to work spells and dark magic, offering up to these spirits the soul of animals, which is often the price for their assistance. Depending on the influence and power of the spirit, small animals such as rabbits or squirrels may be sufficient. Sometimes, other more powerful spirits require more powerful souls. As far as skinwalkers go, I'm not saying that one of them was involved, but I'd rather just leave all of that alone. Don't seek them out, and they won't come looking for you. This story was told to me by my uncle's friend, something he experienced while he was walking home drunk from Gallup to Zuni. So he said this happened back in the early 90s, when he was a lot younger. He decided to go party in Gallup with his friends. He didn't have a care in the world because he got into an argument with his woman early that day. As he partied into the night, his woman was looking for him all over town till she found him at a local bar. They had an argument as they left town. At some point, he got fed up and got out the car, so he pulled out the drama card and said that he was going to go walking home. His woman, being mad at him, left him in the middle of a dark road. He said it was somewhere between Gallup and the Mustang gas station on 602. He said it was called something else, but I can't remember the name that he said. He said he began to walk, and after a while, he felt like someone was following him. At one point he heard people laughing in the trees. He assumed it was just the locals partying in the distance. When he got close to the Mustang gas station around 11, he noticed a single cab truck creeping up behind him. As they pulled up, he noticed there was two guys that he knew back home. They started asking him if he needed a ride. Without hesitating, he hopped in between both of them. He felt comfortable because he knew the two passengers that were in the truck, and they asked him if he wanted to drink with them. So he did. All three of them drove down drinking, not thinking anything strange. He was having a so-called good time, forgetting about reality and all his issues and all his problems, talking, cracking jokes and everything. As they approached the rest line, they took a dirt road to one of the Nutria lakes. When they got to one of the lakes, they parked the truck. The driver and the passenger offered him more beer, and they asked him why he was walking. So he told them his story and everything that was going on. As a side note, this is never a good idea. Men, and women too. If you're ever having a hard time with your spouse or anybody else, never talk to strangers or people about your problems at home. So he said they were sitting out there for a couple of hours till they finished their drinks. When all the drinks were gone, that's when he started feeling a bit tipsy. As they were sitting there talking, the passenger out of nowhere asked him if he believed in Yenagloshi. He sort of laughed because it was so random, and then he said, "I'm not sure. Why?" Then both of them started laughing, looking at each other. It was an awkward silence. The passenger then continued, "Do you think spirits can follow you home if you're drunk?" At this point he said that he started feeling uncomfortable, and he said that he just wanted to be dropped off. The driver and passenger just continued to laugh, and then they asked him if he was scared. He said no. The passenger then responded with, "Well, that's good." Then both of them started singing, and that's when he got scared. The driver continued to sing louder and faster. All of a sudden, he started to feel the passenger put his arm on his shoulder. That's when he started smelling the odor of dead animal flesh, and he saw the passenger's eyes wide open, and he started growling like a dog at him. He was in total shock that he couldn't move. The driver kept singing. Then, he too started growling, just as the passenger. He said they were both laughing at him. He said the passenger started banging on the window, on the dashboard, shaking, and just laughing and singing, a mixture of everything. He said he wanted to get out, but he didn't know what to do. He started looking around in the state of panic that he was in, and he noticed that the window in the back had one of those things to open. He said he doesn't know how he got out of there. He remembered that he slid the window open and squeezed himself out the back. He felt the car rock back and forth, and he could still hear them laughing, singing, growling, while he was trying to escape. As he got out the truck, he ran down the dirt road, running as fast as he could. At that moment, he heard both truck doors slam shut. That's when he started hearing heavy footsteps behind him, and then that growling, running after him. He said he knew he was being chased. He just kept running while they were after him, laughing as well. He ran so fast that he heard the two laughing at him in the distance, mocking him. He got a little tired at some point, and he slowed down, but then he would hear the two come after him again, and so he kept running until he, quote-unquote, lost them, and he was able to get on the main road. As he started walking on the main road, that's when he felt a sense of relief when he saw a car pulling up behind him. So much for that. He said it was them. So he started running again as they followed behind him, honking the truck and laughing at him. He thought he was gonna die that night, but then they just drove off as another car was coming in the opposite way. He flagged the other car down desperately. As it stopped, he hopped in. The driver of the car was sort of afraid of him, but seeing how scared he was, he knew that he needed help. He told me that he didn't leave his house for at least a few weeks after that, very afraid that he might run into those two people again. After that incident, he was so traumatized that he stopped drinking. Plus, never saw those guys again. I would think twice before drinking. That was the story he told me, and he also warned me to be careful on who I hang out with. I do get the chills just thinking about what he went through. I guess the real question that I have, were they real? Or were they just pretenders? I have a story my dad would tell us every few years. It's about a skinwalker. This happened in coal mine, south of Tuba City in Arizona. I'm not sure when it happened, but from the way my dad told it, I'm guessing my dad was still a teenager, so maybe around the 60s. Back then, not too many people owned vehicles on the res. People still traveled by horses, and maybe your closest neighbor lived miles away from you, and if you were lucky, only family lived nearby. This was my dad's cousin, who was riding his horse to where my dad and his family lived at. It was towards the evening, and it was getting dark. There he was going along, when all of a sudden, he gets a feeling of being followed, someone behind him. So for a few times he stops his horse and listens. Nothing, just the sound of bushes blowing, so he just continues on. A few minutes later, again, and I'm not sure about you, and I know this was back in the day, but even now just walking around here, so I can just imagine back then. So my dad said that his cousin gets the horse to go a bit faster, because he's getting nervous and scared. Plus, the horse starts acting up as well, and it starts wanting to go faster, like if it just wanted to get away. But he pulls back on the reins. By now the horse is ready pulling to go, and then that's when he starts to hear whistling. At that moment, the horse right then takes off. The whistling gets louder, but he still can't see what it is. Then he starts to hear a set of footsteps, lighter, faster, almost like someone was running really fast. He looks down and sees something running beside him, and it starts trying to reach for the reins. It was dark in general, but whatever this thing was now closer to him, and that's when he could see somewhat like feathers tied to whatever the shadow thing was. From that point on, he just let go of the horse, and then it just ran loose. He just held on. I'm not sure how many miles he was chased, but as soon as he got to my dad and mom's house, he was greeted by the barking dogs, and then he jumped off the horse and ran into a hogan, screaming, and the dogs barking. His cousin came running in. From there, all they could see and hear were the dogs barking in the distance. It sounds like they were after somebody or something. After that night, my dad's cousin didn't go out alone after dark anymore. Well, that's what my dad said. Not even to go check on the livestock, the sheep, or anything. And even though he had to travel, it was now only in the daytime. He never talked much about what he saw. The next morning, my dad said he found a horse down by the canyon. It was all bruised up, and he said that the horse looked very scared as well. They never did figure out what it was, but my dad did say that the dogs would bark every few nights from that day. Also, I know we're not supposed to whistle at night, so I'm pretty sure that's why they tell us not to do anything, because that's how these things communicate, by whistling. I have lived my entire life in Oklahoma, and it's probably exactly how you think it is. Outside of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma is mostly small towns, casinos and lots of, and I mean a lot of them, woods and open plains. There's backcountry galore. It's usually pretty quiet everywhere you go, and people are generally friendly. We're the definition of a flyover state. If there's one thing people immediately relate to Oklahoma, it's our Native American, or Indian American heritage, the folklore that comes with it as well. While the stuff isn't really prevalent in the bigger cities at all, it becomes more prominent as you enter certain parts of the state. For those curious, I'm not sure how much land is still legally considered native, but it's most likely more than any other state. This incident that I'm going to talk about happened in the summer of 2011 at a scout camp not too far from the Oklahoma-Texas border. This was the last trip that I ever made out there, and I don't regret it. Camp is from Sunday through Saturday, 1 week. You arrive on Sunday, you work on merit badges Monday through Thursday, you chill on Friday, and then you leave on that Saturday. Now, the leaders of my troop were mostly one family, whom I will call the Perkins. There was the great-grandfather Chuck, the grandfather Daryl, and the grandson Buck. Chuck was about 75 when I joined, and he fit the typical old man stereotype like a glove. He was abrasive, impatient, and quick to lose his temper, while at the same time he was happy to help out any boy that wasn't asking stupid questions. Chuck was also a war veteran, I'm not sure which war though. Daryl was a lot like his father, except, I'm not sure. Maybe cryptic is the best word, I guess. What I'm trying to say is that you can tell that Daryl had seen some shit. He was a little out there, very my way or the highway type. He was around 60-ish, but he was built like a bear. The man was massive and intimidating, and he knew this as well. To this day, I think Daryl knows a hell of a lot more about this incident than he'll ever tell, but I never had the courage to ask him about it. Buck, the grandson, was a year older than me. Buck was a little bit hard-headed, but he was tough and built just like his granddad. He was also loyal like a golden retriever. The word fear wasn't exactly in his rather vocabulary, but I would say otherwise. Another key player was my best friend at that time, Dylan. Dylan was stubborn, headstrong, and always looking for trouble. He and I had started scouts together at 6, and we were the only two that had stuck together since that time. We were always together, which maybe saved our lives that night. Now, I was the opposite of Dylan. I was a bit meek, easily scared, and suffer from constitutional delay. which means that I looked like I was 10, even though I was actually 15. So anyways, we had been going to the scout camp for as long as I had been involved with the troop. Every summer, always in June or July, we would make our week trip down there and then go back home. Dylan and I knew what the camp was supposed to feel and sound like, as did Chuck and Daryl, who had been going there for about 20 odd years or so. This year though, we immediately knew something was off. Have you ever walked into a place that you know very well and just felt like bad vibes? Like if bad energy was taking up residence somewhere. It was kind of like that the moment that we drove through the gates. The younger boys seemed pretty oblivious, but I knew Dylan felt it, like I did. And Daryl, man, I don't think I ever seen Daryl as tense as he was the whole week. He was normally pretty chillax, if a little strict, but he was on edge the moment that we arrived on the grounds until we left on Saturday. I suppose the best way to do this from here on out is to give a chronological account of events that happened day to day over the whole week. This is the only way I think I can do this without losing myself, and you all as well. The first thing you do when arriving at camp is to drive to the registration office to confirm campsites, the number of boys and leaders, and everything else. We did all this, but Daryl was gone for a very long time. When he came back, he was being escorted by a camp ranger. As Daryl was hopping back into the car, I remember hearing the ranger say something along the lines of, "Just let me know ASAP if anything happens." While this isn't strange to hear or say, looking back, I do wonder if it held a deeper meaning. Our campsite was towards the northeast of the camp, down in this tiny valley surrounded by a rock outcropping on the north and on the south. The north rock outcroppings were split from east to west, and it created what we called a storm shelter, basically this little crease that we would hide in if severe weather ever sprang up. I was assigned to check up on it to make sure it was clear of debris and stuff before the week started, so I go walk around the shelter. When I do, I'm slammed with this awful smell. I knew it was something dead. Once I got down there, I saw that it wasn't something big, but rather a bunch of small animals in piles, birds, foxes, raccoons, and parts of a deer. There were a ton of dead, mutilated bodies back there. I nearly puked. It smelled so bad. The heat also wasn't helping. Alarm bells were not ringing yet, but I was definitely weirded out. I told Daryl about it, and he said that he was going to have a look and clean it up. And then I just forgot about it. Our campsite was basically set up as one giant semicircle. The tents were almost formed in like a ring. We spent very little time at our campsite, as we were all out and about working on merit badges. Also at the mess hall, climbing area, shooting range, lake, and some other places. There was no reason for any boy to be in camp, and it was rare to find one who wanted to stay in camp. Dylan and I stuck together most evenings, and Monday night, we decided to go shoot. Or rather, Dylan decided to shoot. I was a terrible shot, and I didn't want to pay for ammo that I would end up wasting. We were about halfway to the range when he realized that he had forgotten his money, so we turned around and headed back towards the camp. When we got there, it was empty as expected, but we noticed that one of the tent flaps had been left open. This was a big issue. Daryl was always on us to keep our flaps shut to keep any curious woodland animals or insects out of our tents. So I walked over there to zip it up. That's when I realized that it was still zipped. The door had simply been ripped open. The tent had been ransacked. The sleeping bags were shredded. The trunks flipped over, and the supplies had been gone through. It was a wreck. I called Dylan over, and our conversation went something like, "Fuck man, who would do this?" I don't know. It wasn't one of our boys. Daryl would make sure that he would never see the light of day again. Should we tell him? Do you want to have your head chopped off? Let him find it for himself. This was a stupid decision in hindsight. We should have found Daryl and told him immediately, but since we didn't want to suffer his wrath, we didn't. We got back to camp that night, and everyone was on edge. All the younger boys were freaking out, whispering about Bigfoot. Daryl told us that for the rest of the week, we all had to be back at camp before sundown, which I thought was kind of pointless, because the tent had been ransacked during the day, but whatever. Tuesday was actually pretty eventful. All I recall is that some boys a couple campsites over from ours got scared because they heard noises in and around their campsite that night. If I'm being honest, that could have been anything. There's an awful lot of animal life out here in Oklahoma, and it's pretty common for new or amateur scouts to draw raccoons, foxes, and sometimes bigger things into camp by leaving food out at night. But I do still wonder if anything going on was related to my other experience that week. Wednesday was different. The bad vibes seemed to be getting stronger, or maybe it was just me getting more worked up. I'm not sure. What I do know is that the mess hall had been broken into the night before, torn up and everything. The food had been half eaten. Supplies were thrown everywhere. At least that's what I heard. We weren't even allowed up to the mess hall until dinner that night, by which time the camp had cleaned everything up. Of course, everyone was on edge now. There were so many things being said. Some of them were saying, "Did you hear they found some homeless guy camping out on the other side of the lake?" Someone else would say, "Tom found some really weird footprints outside his own tent last night. Did you see them?" "I heard some weird mating call last night. Did anyone else?" "I could have sworn I was being stalked walking back to camp last night. Does anyone else feel that same way?" There was one that stuck out to me after the week was over, and the only reason it did is because it reminded me of my experience on Sunday. "I found a dead raccoon outside my tent last night. It was like mutilated and fucked up." Which one of you guys thought it would be funny? Outside of all of this, Wednesday was fairly uneventful too, just really tense. Thursday, holy shit. Thursday night, the camp would always hold this party thing out by the main gate to sort of celebrate the hard work that everyone had put in over the week. There would be a bonfire, a chuck wagon, basically a canteen on wheels, stories and songs, and lots of Boy Scout stuff, you know. Daryl was super against letting anyone in the troop go. He wanted to keep every boy in the camp that night, but after listening to 12 and 13-year-olds whine and cry for 30 minutes, he eventually let them go, as long as they were escorted by the older boys. So Buck, Dylan, and I were pretty much responsible for 15 middle schoolers. Daryl said he had a meeting to go to, which I knew was a lie. Scoutmaster meetings were always held in the mornings, never at night. But what the hell? So the three of us started walking down there, when I realized that we had left the flashlights back at the camp, and we only had 5 minutes of light left. I told Dylan and Buck to go on ahead of me, but both of them insisted on coming. In the end, Buck escorted the kids to the bonfire, while Dylan and I went back to the camp. Now that was a mistake, for a few reasons. We had only been gone for about 10 minutes, which means it was almost dark once we got back. But our camp, everything had been torn down. The tents and their contents were thrown everywhere. Food was out and scattered. It was a complete mess. Alarm bells were basically screaming now. Code red, get the fuck out of there right now. But Dylan was already into the camp before I could stop him. That's when the smell hit us. The smell of dead, decaying stuff. But this time, it was mixed with something else. Kinda like spoiled milk. I'm not sure how to describe it. It's not the typical burnt copper blood scent that a lot of people say is related to the goat man. I know what that smells like. This was something else. Dylan and I both agreed that we needed to find Daryl ASAP. Fate was on our side that night, because not a second later, he rushed into the camp in full commando mode. I'm talking giant knife on his hip, brandishing a pistol. Sorry, I don't know what kind of gun it was. I don't even know anything about guns. And also the biggest flashlight that I had ever seen. Dylan and I started asking Daryl about what was going on, begging for answers. He then told us to shut the fuck up. in the harshest but most quiet voice that I ever heard. That's when I noticed his face for the first time, and a massive bruise on the left side of his face. It looked like he had picked a fight and lost. Let me just remind you that Daryl is 6'7" and 260 pounds. He was pretty much pure muscle. Whatever got the upper hand on him was strong. The conversation with Daryl went something like, "Where the hell are the kids?" "The bonfire, sir." "What the fuck are you two doing back here?" "We forgot the flashlight, sir." "Alright, here's what's gonna happen. Dylan, I'm gonna give you this knife. And you, go get those flashlights you were talking about and point them towards the storm shelter. I'm going over there. If anything but me comes out, you two run like hell. You got that?" We nodded, and off he went. He rounded a corner into the shelter. That's when we heard the noise. Have you ever heard someone trying to talk while choking on their own blood? Something like that. That's what it sounded like, with a mix of low growling. Dylan and I stood there frozen for what felt like hours, but was most likely like 5 minutes, when the noise stopped and Daryl returned, pale as a sheet, but in one piece. Daryl then escorted us there and refused to answer any of our questions or tell us anything about what just happened. All he said was, "I don't think we'll have to worry about anything for the rest of the week." So we went to the bonfire, but Dylan and I kept to ourselves and tried to figure out what the hell was going on. When we got back to camp, we did our best to repair as much as we could in the dark. Dylan and I didn't sleep at all that night. We were wide awake, and what must have been around midnight, I heard a few noises outside. I saw a flashlight beam waving around before finally coming to a still, pointed towards the storm shelter. I poked my head out of my tent, and I saw Daryl sitting in a chair, flashlight pointed at the storm shelter, watching and waiting. I watched Daryl all night. Friday morning, I finally got some answers. Around then, Chuck came out of his tent and proceeded to have a not exactly quiet conversation with Daryl. Now bear with me, as I'm remembering all this from memory. Some bits may not be entirely accurate. Chuck asked, "Is there anything new?" Daryl responded, "No, I've been out here all night." Chuck responded, "I still think you're wrong. They never come this far south, especially this time of year. It must have been something else." Daryl then said, "I know what I saw, Dad. I'm telling you, you're getting more bold, more desperate." Chuck then said, "Well, I'm heading to the mess hall right now. I need my coffee. Do you want anything?" Then they talked about breakfast for a while, and Chuck eventually left. I figured if I wanted any sort of answers to last night, now was my chance to ask Daryl to talk alone. So I approached Daryl, and before I could say anything, he turned around, and he gave me a look that stopped me in my tracks. He says, "Come sit." So I sat next to him, and this is all I get out of him. "You were pretty brave last night, kid. Incredibly stupid, but brave. What did you see?" I then said, "Nothing, sir." He just responded with a, He was quiet for a good 5 minutes, and I finally mustered up the courage to ask him, "What the hell is going on, sir?" He then said, "How old are you?" "I'm 15, I said. "Son, the world is a far darker place than you know. Right now, you're too young. Let me give you some advice that you have to keep in your head at times like this. Don't ask questions that you don't want to know the answer to, or that you already know the answer to." Do I know the answer to this question, sir?" "It wasn't natural, was it?" I asked. "That depends on your definition of natural, son. To me, that thing that's been here with us all week is natural as any other creature in these woods and on this earth. It's simply just the darker side of nature, one that usually stays away from heavy traffic areas like this. They don't really like people, especially in big groups. Then what's it doing here, sir?" "Honestly, I don't know. I think it got confused, maybe even lost. But for now, I don't think it'll come back while we're here. Dylan then woke up about then, and so did the rest of the camp. So our conversation was cut short. The rest of Friday was pretty uneventful. Dylan, Buck, and I piddled around camp for a while, talking about what we thought it was. Or rather, Buck and I did. Dylan didn't really talk about it, and he started acting really irritated as the day went on. Friday night, all was well. I slept good. I had bad dreams, but I still slept. Saturday, we were off at about 6:30 that morning to tear down the camp. I was ready to leave. Even though Daryl had been reassuring Friday morning, I could tell he was eager to leave. He was tense and would often stop to look towards the storm shelter. About 11:30, Daryl asked me to check the shelter area and also clean it up with him, even though no one had used it that week. We got there, and it was completely different than what I seen Sunday. It had been clean, spotless, and something similar to a sigil. It looked like a circle with two arrows pointing towards a dog in the center had been marked on each side of the canyon walls. I assume it's Native American, but I'm not sure what it means, and I have never really cared to find out. We left about noon, and I never gone back. So that's my big story, the one that I can't explain. I know for a fact that Daryl knew way more than he was letting on. I think Buck knew more than I did too, but he clammed up whenever I tried to talk to him about it. I think whatever it was must have been something with Native American, given the symbol, but I'm still not sure what it was. Have you ever had a creepy experience with dolls? What about Kachina dolls? Or just dolls in general? Have you heard about them? I was told that my tribe used to do a death ceremony way before my time. My grandpa said they would make some dolls for the ceremony. I do think dolls are those things that people can use for evil as well, since, some dolls are made with real human hair or other things. So I'm pretty sure some dolls have quote-unquote things trapped inside of them. My mom told me the story some time ago. She said that when she was little, her and her siblings lived with my grandma and her family in Phoenix. And she said they had bought some human-like dolls from a lady. My mom said that the lady was throwing them away, but my grandma decided that my mom and my auntie would want a doll because they had complained several times that they were bored. So my grandma ended up buying them. My mom said that the dolls were actually really pretty and fun to play with as well. But one night, they didn't play with them. Something about them getting mad. My mom and auntie, that is. So when they were sleeping on the floor in their room, my mom, who is a light sleeper, she said she saw one of the dolls get up, and it started talking and pointing to her. Then, they started walking around. So my mom got scared and nudged at my auntie. With her eyes, she told her to look up. My mom said that my auntie went into full panic mode. She jumped up and ran towards my grandma's room and left my mom alone with the dolls. But she said that when my auntie ran out the room, the dolls also ran after her. All she remembers is a bunch of noise going on, and my grandma got them and threw them in a bag and put them in some sort of garbage can. The next day they went to visit a medicine man nearby, and he said that the dolls had evil spirits trapped inside of them and that they wanted attention. So the medicine man requested them. My mom said that they went back home and they couldn't find the dolls no more. However, when they went into the room, the dolls were there, just sitting on the bed. My grandma grabbed the dolls, put them in a trash bag, and gave them to the medicine man. I know these were not Kachina dolls, but what do you think? Have you ever had a creepy experience with any type of doll? One of my coworkers told me that her uncle and some of his friends were coming back from Rapid one evening just before dark. The sun had set right as they got to Red Shirt Hill. They were almost to the scenic overlook when they saw a little boy walking along the road. He had no shirt or shoes, and it was actually pretty chilly. He started to slow down when the boy turned around and saw them. He ran down into the ditch and squatted, as if trying to hide. They moved the car along to where he sat. When they finally saw him hiding in the tall grass, they asked if he was alright or if he needed help, only his scared face showing above the grass. One of the men said that he was going to go take a look at him, and he opened the car door. As soon as he had 1 foot outside of the car, the little boy stood up. He started growing taller, but not just like a human, a long black shadow. The men screamed and floored it up the road. The passengers in the backseat were yelling, "Go faster, hurry." The uncle looked in the rearview mirror and saw that the boy had grown into a tall, long shadow. Not only this, but it seemed to be running behind them, keeping up with the speed of the car. He pushed the car for all it was worth, making it to the top of the scenic overlook and hitting the straightaway. One of the back passengers said that he was gone, but still, they flew back home. Finally, they stopped in Oglala. The uncle asked where the thing went, and his friend told him that when they got to the top of the overlook, it stopped, and then it turned and went down into the Badlands. And this is exactly why I personally never drive around that area at night. This incident took place in Window Rock, Arizona. When I was 17, I was with family, and we were in the area of Butterfly Butte, going through the mountains near Window Rock. It was late at night, and all around us were nothing but trees. We were in a pickup truck. I was sitting in the front with my sister and her husband. My 2 brothers and cousin were sitting back in the bed. All of a sudden, this critter runs out in front of us and across the headlights. I think it's a deer. My brother-in-law, Eddie, said it was a coyote. It happened so fast, but just in case, we do say a prayer. Coyotes often bring bad luck. Well, we soon forget about it, driving along and talking, when up in front of us, we see, standing in the middle of the country road, are 4 more coyotes. Now, I've seen lots of coyotes out where we live, but it's rare when you see more than 2 at a time, and even less sitting in the road. Eddie slows down the truck, but they stay right there, almost as if daring him. Then, when it looks like he's gonna have to stop or hit them, they move off towards the shoulder and disappear into the trees. Eddie then makes a remark that something must be going on, and that he wants to get home as soon as possible, but my sister tells him better safe than sorry, and to not go too fast. Now, the only thing worse to us Navajos than coyotes appearing out of nowhere is the sound of an owl. When you hear them the way that we did, something's not right. It could mean that someone close to you is in danger. The fact is, they're always quiet, but we start hearing these owl hoots, one after the other, as if they're communicating. More creepy than anything, there were 6 of us in that truck, and I know I counted 6 hoots. The turnoff from the country road is a dirt road, and it is less than 10 minutes from our house. Eddie is driving along, going a bit faster than my sister is comfortable with. Looking back over my shoulder, I can see the rest of them there in the bed bouncing, and also sliding around a bit. Only a minute or 2 down the road, we can see the lights from the houses, still in the distance, but close enough that we're all feeling better about things. Suddenly, Eddie slams on the brakes and yanks the truck to the left. I swear I saw something big and black definitely up right in front of us. Despite Eddie's efforts, the truck runs right into it. We hit it so hard that it sounded like a gun going off. I was holding on tight to the door and seat, but I could hear the rest of my family being thrown around in the back. They were screaming and cursing. Eddie was able to get control of the vehicle pretty fast. When it stopped, I jumped out to make sure my 2 brothers and my cousin were good. They were only banged up a bit, which is more than I can say for the pickup. The whole front was total. The only thing still intact was one headlight, which was still on. As we're standing around the truck, we're all looking to the right of the road, where less than 6 feet away is this 6-foot high chain link fence that runs along the shoulder in both directions, as far as the eye can see. The woods beyond the fence goes all the way back into the hills. The point is that there is no way that whatever we hit took off in that direction, or even came at us from that way. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that whatever it was came out of nowhere. At least it seemed like it. Almost like it just popped up from the surface of the road. Or maybe dropped down from the sky. In the meantime, Eddie was taking a closer look at the damage. It was, after all, his own truck. He noted that there was some skin, hair, and also blood on what remained of the grill, along the lip of the hood, and even by the light fixture that was broken. Convinced that whatever it was hurt and most likely crumble up nearby. We looked around up and down the road, and off the shoulder to the left, but we found nothing. It was really dark, and it just felt very eerie. We then decided that we would come back when the sun was up and look around. We all piled back in the truck. Eddie couldn't get it to start. He turned the key in the ignition and couldn't get a sound, almost like there was no battery. The funny thing is that one headlight was still on. Go figure. The type of shit that happens out here on the rest, huh? No sooner had Eddie finished cursing and punching the steering wheel, we hear off into the darkness, and in the trees to the left, some whistling and laughing, almost like someone is playing games with us. 1 second it seems to be coming from over there. The other second it seems to be coming from over here. And then after that from back a ways. It went on like this for like 10 minutes. My sister then tells us it's a skinwalker, and she begins to say some Navajo prayers. By this time only my sister is still in the truck. Eddie and I are standing by the bed on the driver's side, and my 2 brothers and cousin are in the bed. My older brother, Nicky, he's not scared. He just says it's some idiot in the woods, and he volunteers to run to the house and come back with my father's car. The house is less than a mile away. No sooner does he start jogging off, we start to hear the laughing and whistling going with him, almost like he's being followed. He did tell us later that he was aware of it, and even though he thought he heard his name being whispered, he just kept ignoring it and just continued jogging. About 10 minutes later, we see these headlights coming towards us. It was Nicky. When we all got back to the house, Eddie called the sheriff to report the accident. It was really late, but he told Eddie that he was going to meet him there and have a look just in case somebody did get hit. I went back with Eddie in my dad's car. The sheriff showed up only a few minutes later. He had one of those industrial-sized flashlights, but as much as he looked around, he couldn't find anything. He agreed by the look of the hair left behind that whatever we hit, it was not a deer. When we told him about the whistling and laughing, his whole demeanor just changed. It was obvious that he was no longer interested in standing out there in the dark. He went back to his car and wrote out one of those little accident reports, and he gave it to Eddie. The next day, my mother had a friend of hers come to the hogan. She was this really old woman. We were actually scared of her when we were kids. She had this small crystal-like thing, sort of yellow in color. She would hold it up and look through it, almost like she could see into the past, or future, or something. And what she told my mom is something that has stuck with me since that day. She told her that there was a battle of wills between a local medicine man and a skinwalker last night, and that if it wasn't for the medicine man distracting the skinwalker, all 6 of us would have died when the truck went out of control and hit the trees. She never did tell us who that medicine man was, nor the skinwalker, even though she said that she knew them both. And interesting enough, when Eddie went back for the truck the next morning, it started right up with no issues. Now keep in mind that a skinwalker is also a medicine man, except they gone evil. and practice bad medicine. Please be careful when you're driving on the res at night. I grew up in the South, a bunch of beautiful places to see that haven't been taken over by concrete yet. It's nice, but along with that, it's pretty boring. Being a teenager and wanting to go out and have fun, it's led to mostly improvising with your buddies and hoping something good will come out of the night. There wasn't really a local spot to go hang out, like a club or a cool bar, and the places that were close to this was boring, because you had already done them so many times. Something that I found a ton of enjoyment as a teen was just cruising around super late at night, listening to music. I would fill my gas tank up, grab something to drink, a cigarillo, and I would just take off driving around until the sun came up. It was a way for me to just clear my mind and relax. Those country back roads were always fun to drive down at 2 a.m. and was also just the right amount of spooky. I can't exactly remember what month it was, but I know for a fact it was the summertime. I was just out of school, and I also remember it being a comfortable chill night, so if I was to guess, it must have been around July or August. I was cruising around like I always did, and I was completely worry-free. I had music blasting and I was in my zone. I decided to head down to a park, just because I was bored. This park is at the very end of a long stretch of a country road, but it's also a really pretty drive. When I say country road, I don't mean that it's some dirt road that goes through the woods or anything crazy like that. It's a normal paved road, but there is really nothing on it after a certain point. The entire road takes about 20 minutes to drive down to get to the park, and after about 10 minutes into the drive, the houses start to get spread out further and further, and eventually there's no houses and just road leading into the park. I think a lot of the reason I like this drive at night is because of how creepy it was, and I looked at it as some sort of adventure or whatever. The park isn't open for camping or anything. It's mostly just a lot of land with walking trails and biking trails set up through miles of woods. So obviously at around 3 a.m. in the morning, it's pretty dead. I made it there, and I just did a slow normal little loop around drive of the park. Now, the night before it had stormed pretty bad. So bad that I remember my parents and I had to take shelter because of the threat of a tornado touchdown. There ended up being no tornado, but the storms were pretty damn rough. Because of this, I came up on a fallen tree in the road that looped around to the exit of the park. This must have happened due to the storm. It wasn't some massive tree or anything, but I know for a fact that there was no way I could have gone over it with my car. It was pitch black everywhere, besides the front of my car, because of my headlights, and because of that, I ruled out backing up the entire way I just drove when I entered the park. I knew that was super dangerous, and there was no way. At this spot on the road there was flat land on each side of me. I figured that it would make the most sense to just back up in the grass beside me, just a little, and then drive back the way I came. It was a one-way loop around the park, but I wasn't really worried about going out the wrong way since it was so late. So I started to back up off the road so I could get my car turned around. All was good until I went to pull back up on the road. I didn't take into account how wet the grass was and the amount of mud. My car went nowhere. My back tires were completely stuck and were spinning in place as I was trying to floor the gas pedal. I started to become pretty scared at this point. Not the most ideal situation to be in. I immediately take my cell phone out of my pocket and saw that I had service. A super huge feeling of relief. I called my parents and told them what happened and where I was. They were pretty pissed at me, but said that they were going to pay for a tow truck to come get me out. Both of my parents drove small 4-door sedans, and they would have been zero help in the situation. I was about 45 minutes away from my house and the rest of most human civilization, so I realized that I would be stuck out there for at least an hour before someone was able to come get me. It was a freaky feeling, but I was trying to clear my head and just continue to listen to music and be on my phone in the car while I was just waiting. Not really much more I could do. After I kind of calmed down from the initial anger that I had, I started to check out my surroundings. Didn't even notice at first because of everything going on, but in front of my car's placement was a field that was full of the most amount of deer that I think I ever seen at once. There must have been about 40 of them, just walking around and eating the grass. The field wasn't directly in front of my car, but if I was to get out and throw a rock, I would have easily been able to hit one of them. So if I was to guess, they were about 30 yards out. This didn't really help with the creepy level going on. Looking out in front of your car and seeing about 80 eye reflections staring back at you. It's just a bit of an alarming feeling overall. But I was relieved it was just a field of deer. I watched them for a little bit, but I was quickly over it and just started to browse through my social media. They seemed to have been over it quicker than I was, because they all went back to walking around and eating once they figured out that I wasn't going to attack them or anything. After browsing my phone for about 15 minutes, I finally get a call back from my parents letting me know that a tow truck guy is on the way and about an hour and a half out from my location. Still to this day, I remember hearing that and having the thought of, you gotta be fucking kidding me. I understood that me, and only me, was the reason I was in the situation I was in, so I really couldn't be mad at anyone else. That was very obviously not what I wanted to hear. I decided that the smartest thing for me to do was just make sure my doors were locked, lay back in my seat, and take a nap to pass time quick. So that's what I did. So I'll wake up about 45 minutes later to the feeling of being watched. I'm not sure if anyone has ever experienced that feeling before, because I don't know how common it is. But there was a sixth sense alarm going off in my head, telling me that I needed to wake up. Waking up to that feeling in the situation I was in, and the surrounding that I was in, was most likely the worst case scenario. I sit up and immediately check my surroundings, and see nothing. I looked through my car very quickly for any sort of weapon, and I found a pocket knife. A fucking pocket knife. I was very scared, even though I saw and heard absolutely nothing. That feeling is terrifying. I was shocked to see that the field of deer in front of me was still full of deer. I don't know anything about animals, but I guess I always just assumed they don't hang out in the same place for long. Not sure why I thought that, but I was surprised to see them. I called my parents back to see if they heard any kind of update from the tow truck dude. I decided not to mention the feeling I was having because I didn't want them to worry more, and I also knew it was nothing more than a feeling, and also nothing to back up why I was feeling that way, other than just being spooked out in general. No update from the tow truck guy, so we all assumed everything was still the same on his end. The call lasted just a few minutes because I felt like such a dick. They both had to wake up for work in a few hours, and now have to spend some money. And on top of all that, I'm sure they were worried about me. I could tell they were annoyed at the situation, but also worried. I told them that I was going to tell them when the guy arrives, and that I'm sorry. We hung up, and I looked up from the phone, and immediately went from 0 to 100 in panic mode. The deer in front of me were all completely perked up, staring in the same direction, to the right of them. Let me remind you that there's about 40 deer in this field. Every single one of them standing completely still, looking at something. I put my high beams on and stared, waiting for absolutely anything to happen. Nothing. I tapped the horn real quick. They didn't even budge or look my way. They were all still completely glued to what was by them. The way the tree line was, I couldn't see that far over the field. I know they were looking into the woods by them, but where I was at, I was only able to see them. I could hear my heartbeat. I grabbed that stupid pocket knife and just waited for something to happen. I would say it was about a minute after I honked that every single one of them, in unison, started to run the opposite way. They were running at full speed, and within 20 seconds, The field was completely empty. I was petrified in fear. I knew that staying in my car is what would be the safest thing to do, but it's the worst feeling when you feel like a sitting duck. My head was on a swivel. I was freaking out in every way possible. I assumed there was a bear or something, but it could be anything. I was convinced at this point that it was the devil himself. I didn't know what to do. I knew that the tow truck was close by, but I had no idea where he was. I began to shake because of my nerves and just looked around to make sure nothing was by me and focusing on the field in front of me. I did this for what felt like an actual eternity, sitting in complete silence and darkness in the middle of nowhere, waiting for something to jump out and attack you. 15 of the longest minutes of my life go by, and I start to see some lights break through the tree line on the road. As it gets closer, I see it's the tow truck guy. The lights on his truck felt like it was Jesus coming from heaven to rescue me. He gets up to me, and I jump out of my car and immediately ask him if he has a gun on him. I told him very quickly what just happened to me, and that something is definitely out here, nearby. He let me know that he had a shotgun in the truck and assured me that it was most likely a bear or a bobcat. He did give me the whole, "they are more scared of you than you are of them" bullshit. The tree was small enough for him to sort of bulldoze it out of the way with his truck, and then he attached my car to his and pulled me out of the spot I was stuck in. The whole time he was doing his thing, I still had my eyes glued out in that field waiting for something. He was completely done with everything in about 15 minutes, and he told me to follow his truck out of there, onto the main road again. I got in my car and was ready more than anything to get the fuck out of this park. We started to drive away from the spot that I was in, and I still had my head on a swivel, completely shaken up. As we were driving away, I looked in my rear view mirror. We were down the park road, just a tiny bit, but I could still see the spot that I was stuck in lit up from the vehicle's lights and the moon. That's when I saw in my mirror a man come out of the tree line behind where my car was and walk into the middle of the road and just watched us drive away. My heart stopped beating, literally. I lost my breath and my eyes started to get full of tears because of how scared I was in this moment. I couldn't see any sort of details like what he looked like or even what he was wearing. To be honest, I don't really care. The feeling that I felt driving away from that spot, knowing that he was right there the whole fucking time just watching me as I was freaking out, looking around, watching me as I was completely alone for a long time, maybe even coming right up to my window and watched me as I slept. That's a feeling that I can't even explain in words. All these years later, it still messes with me quite a bit. The entire time we were driving off, as long as I could see him, he didn't move. He just watched us in the road. A million things went through my mind. I was scared that there might be a few people up the road waiting for us. I was trying to figure out if I should start beating on my horn like crazy to get the tow truck guy to stop or not. I decided that all I wanted to do was get out of there, more than anything. The second that we finally got out of the park and was able to be on a 2-lane road again, I flew past the tow truck driver and I did nothing below 70 the entire way home. I flew through stop signs and stoplights. I didn't care. The only thing on my mind was making it home. I got home, ran inside, very quickly acknowledged my parents and said sorry and thank you, and went to my room. I didn't get a single second of sleep the rest of the night. I was searching for any sort of records of things happening in that area, escaped convicts, similar stories, anything. And so I came to the conclusion that the man was maybe homeless. I read many things online, how it's common for homeless people to build some sort of shelter in the woods, which does make sense to me as to why they would do that. But obviously the unknown is the scariest part of it all. What if he wasn't homeless? What if he was gonna hurt me? There's so many possibilities of what could have happened, but the outcome that did happen is what I am most grateful for. I never did tell my parents this story until many years after it happened, and I was already older and moved out. It freaked them the fuck out too when I told them. I never went back to that park. Ever. Even though I no longer live by there, I still have no desire to ever go back there. I don't think I could, even in broad daylight with a ton of people around. I also decided to stop doing those late night cruises. I did a few after that time with people, but even then, I felt very uncomfortable. I grew up in Winslow. I heard all the stories about the rules and skinwalkers and a few other things that you might haven't even heard about. But every now and then, I notice something consistent in stories that people tell me, and what really made it click is that they sound similar to something that my grandma told me as well. They're all different encounters, all from different people, yet they share a common, what should I call it, a theme, element, or similar experience. So I'll start off with what my grandma told me first, and then I'll tell you the other two that sound alike, but they're from different people, which makes me wonder if anyone else has had a similar experience and maybe know who or what this was. So my grandma, by the way, this didn't happen in Winslow. She grew up in Whitecomb, and eventually they moved to Winslow. She said that my grandfather, he used to drink a lot. She said one day she woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of people talking in the living room. She said she thought to herself, this son of a bitch brought people home to drink with, knowing real well that the kids got school. So she said that she gets up to go to the living room to tell everybody to leave. And when she got there, no one was there, just my grandpa talking. She never heard the door open, and she looked around, but there was no one else. Nobody who ran off or nobody trying to hide. So she tells him to be quiet because the kids are asleep and they got school in the morning. She goes back to her room and the voices come again. This time when she runs back, she says that grandpa is passed out on the sofa and that it's really cold. At this point she's confused, and she assumed that maybe she had started dreaming or was hearing voices. As she's about to walk back to the room, that's when she heard a voice again. She didn't tell me exactly what she heard, but it caused her to start praying, and then she said the coldness started to go away. When I asked her what happened or what it was, she simply said it was the devil. This next story I will tell in first person from how it was told to me. My grandfather in the early 70s, he was drinking with a group of friends. They were behind the house making a bonfire as they started to get drunk. As they were getting louder, having fun, they started to take pictures, making it a night to remember. He said it was a group of about 20 of them. Of course, he didn't exactly know everyone, but he knew majority of the people there. He said they were all having a good time. In the next few weeks or so, he ended up asking the friend that was taking the pictures if he had gotten them developed so that he could see them. When the pictures finally arrived, they were going through them, and they came across a picture where he was with his friend, but they were holding someone in the middle. Well, like if they took a group picture, all three of them, except no one was standing there, even though they had one arm around that person. He said that they burned the pictures right away. When I asked my grandfather about that story again, he just says that it was the devil that they met that night. This happened to my mom when her auntie, my stepdad, and the uncles were partying in some rental home. They noticed that there was an extra person in the room drinking with them, because my uncle told them to pass the bottle. They said that the guy has it, and they said they knew it was just them and no strangers, and so they said that the person was a spirit, and right away they all got up and left out of that house. My uncle, who was renting the place, refused to go back. So do you see how in each of these stories there was a stranger who showed up during a gathering and then disappeared, and no one ever remembers inviting them? Some people say it's the infamous shadow person. Some say it can be a trickster spirit, maybe even a skinwalker, which I highly doubt it. I swear nowadays anything paranormal happens on the res, and everyone blames it on the skinwalker. I don't think it helps that our stories have made them ways outside of our culture, and like everything else, people have twisted and turned it into something cool to talk about. When I asked my own parents a while back if growing up, something like this ever happened to them, my mom just said, "That's why you don't drink or be out at night. You're basically calling on the enemy." When we lived in Gallup, we lived in Sunshine Canyon in one of the houses behind Harold Runnels on Wilson Avenue. Our friends there mentioned that there was paranormal activity in some of the houses, and apparently, skinwalkers would walk by the arroyo behind some of the houses. If you're familiar with this area, you'll know how scary it can get out there at night. So one night, I was laying with my son who was 4 years old. We were on the couch in the living room. I woke up early the next morning, and I swear, I couldn't find my son. I looked in the kitchen, the kids' room, the playroom, my bedroom, and he was nowhere. I started walking down the hallway back to the living room, and that's when I started to hear some chanting coming out of the closet in the hall. The voice sounded like the little kid's voice from the movie The Shining. You know, when he talks to his mom in that scary voice. The chanting started out slow, and then it started getting fast. At this point, I'm freaking out. I was gonna open the closet door, but my fear got the best of me, and so instead, I made my way back to the living room, and to my surprise, there, on the couch was my son. I was really confused on how he was there, when he wasn't there when I woke up. Anyways, this was the first sign of many. Another time, my kids, my son, and now at this point his 2-year-old sister, they came to my bedroom and wanted to sleep with me. My son said that they saw a little blonde girl, and that she was bothering them, and wanted them to play with her. He also said that there was an old Navajo woman in the room with them. When I went to go check, there was nobody. For the next few weeks, he would always say that the little girl and the old woman would come visit them. So we ended up letting them sleep with us, or I would sometimes go sleep with them, and I would leave the hallway light on. Another night, I happened to fall asleep in the living room, and I woke up, and I saw this old native person looking into the window. He had long hair, and he looked like he didn't have a shirt on. I kept looking at him, and then he just disappeared. I ended up talking to one of my neighbors about the strange things that had been happening, and she also said that she had a relative spend the night at her place, and that apparently a man attacked her relative, trying to strangle her. Her relative tried fighting the man off, and she started yelling, and that he disappeared when my friend ran into the room and turned the lights on. We did end up moving from that place because it was scary as fuck. I heard it was the old ceremonial grounds, and there was a battle there a long time ago. Also, my ex-husband used to go to the bar, and whenever he would walk back, he would take the path on the arroyo, and he would claim that he would see a skinwalker on the other side of the arroyo, walking towards town. I am Navajo, and this isn't just your typical skinwalker story of something running along with me. It's about how your own family out here can be against you. My grandpa said that one night, he and his family were sleeping in the hogan, and they were suddenly awakened to a strange noise on top of the roof. They heard footsteps. It sounded like something was walking around. He said he heard it jump on and off the roof a few times. Grandpa said that he started looking up at the ceiling through the opening of the roof. As he was looking, he said he saw some long fingers grip the opening as something was pulling itself up, and he slowly saw eyes watching them. from the opening. This thing was watching him and his family sleep. So he said he slowly reached over and grabbed his shotgun and went outside. He started yelling and started shooting. He said he heard a horrible cry as he hit it. He said it jumped off after looking at him and then ran away, leaving a trail of blood behind it. The next morning, Grandpa packed himself a sandwich, and he grabbed a handful of ash and went and followed the trail of blood. He said it led him to a mesa with a cave. As he was walking up to the cave, he started hearing singing, and he saw a fire. He loaded his gun and decided to walk into the cave. He said the person that he saw was his own brother. He was singing by the fire, trying to cure his wounds. He then said to his brother that he's not scared, nor is he afraid of him, and then he started throwing some of the ash that he brought towards his brother. He then walked back home. The next day, his brother died. I swear, our grandparents were some of the toughest people when it came to these things or whatever they are. I remember when I was maybe like 5 or 6 years old. We went to go visit my uncle's family in Zuni, New Mexico. They had certain rooms in that house that they told us kids to stay out of. They also had cochinas in the living room, on their mantle. At night, my uncle would put them away in one of the rooms we were told to stay out of. On one of those nights I got up to use the bathroom. Just before I was gonna flush the toilet, I heard what sounded like footsteps of little people. It was like the sound of little bells and the clacking of little sticks together. Then I heard the low tone of about 3 or 4 men, kinda like how it sounds when you see them at the dances. The muffled sound that only comes from behind someone wearing a mask. It didn't make sense to me. I was terrified. I just stood there crying. Then I started to scream out for my mom. Her and my auntie came. I told them what happened. They believed me. My uncle went into the room and left with a bag. He didn't come back until the following afternoon. To this day, I believe it was those little cochina dolls. When I was 23, I had a security gig at a dairy farm in Ohio. It was a modest place, only holding a few dozen cows at any given time. My then co-worker, a 34-year-old recovering meth addict named Corey, had just been fired for letting a cow go missing on his watch. An offense that would get you fired in every sense of the word. For starters, Corey was insane. By the time we met, he was seriously addicted to all kinds of drugs, and it rendered him virtually schizophrenic. Long nights were spent with him during my training period. He would tell me about the CIA and how they were out to get him. He was convinced that they were broadcasting thoughts into his head and that they would stop at nothing to ruin his life. More than once, I would catch him glancing over his shoulder or peeking out of windows with a dumb look on his face, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever was following him. That's the type of person that Corey was. Each of our cows had an ear tag labeled with a number. At 8 p.m., they were each to be guided into their own respective stalls and locked in for the night. Padlocks became the norm after an incident with local kids a few years earlier. In the mornings, we would have to carry around a clipboard containing each lock combination and individually release each one. It was the most annoying way to start the day, but the cows were more secure that way. That's what made Corey's story so unbelievable. He had claimed that the previous night, cow number 29 had been locked away in her stall along with the others. He told us that the only thing out of the ordinary that night was a bat stuck in the rafters that he planned to deal with in the morning. In order for his claim to be true, an intruder would have unlocked the barn with a set of keys, unlocked 29's stall with the correct combination, then reset the locks, and leave, undetected. Either that, or they picked up a 1,600-pound animal and leaped through a window. Considering Corey's nasty habit of abandoning his duties in order to twitch and hallucinate in the corner, a small part of me believed that some two-bit thief might have been able to get one over him. My boss, however, a 50-year-old hothead, concluded that Corey must have been involved with the cow's disappearance and kicked them to the curb. With nobody else to fill his position, my boss had offered to pay me extra for each of his duties that I could complete until we received a new hire. Naturally, I agreed. I would be heading back to school in a few weeks and needed all the money I could get. My first night back at work began normally. Since I would now be doing the work of 2 security guards, I would arrive early to get a head start on Corey's checklist. I started out by sweeping out the barn. Farmhands tried to keep the TMR in a long pile just in front of the stall door so the cows could eat throughout the night, but that shit practically painted the floor by the time I got there. Midway through, I noticed something reflective in the corner of the barn. I swept a loose bit of corn and hay over it to investigate. On the floor before me was a neon yellow ear tag, and I picked it up to examine it. 29. Next to 29's ear tag were the skeletal remains of a bat. I guess that was just another thing that Corey never got around to dealing with. I swept up the bones along with the rest of the barn. By the time I finished, it was already 8 p.m. I made my way out to the fields, and one at a time, I guided each cow to its assigned stall. I got through about 10 or so before I noticed something strange. Across the field, about 50 meters away from everything else and all the others, was a cow, alone. It faced away from me, seemingly transfixed on a nearby cornfield. Seeing a cow on its own is nothing strange, as they sometimes need personal space the same way as people do. What was strange, though, was the way that her tail stuck straight out from behind her, unwavering. She stood as if she were afraid to slip, with her feet planted far apart. Perhaps the strangest of all, her head appeared to be tilted at a 90-degree angle. I wasn't eager to tell my boss. They had already put down so many sick cows before, but losing 2 in the matter of a week might have been enough to send them over the edge. That's when I decided to save that cow for last, as I continued to guide the rest of them inside for the night. Being in charge of twice the amount of cows I was used to was time-consuming. It took me nearly an hour to round them up. By the time I locked number 36 for the night, it was 9 o'clock. I should have been making my rounds by then, especially given the circumstances. I just had that last cow to deal with. When contemplating how long it was going to take me to unlock each cow in the morning, I realized something that made my blood run cold. The only stall left empty was number 29. I shuffled to the field, and surely enough, she was there. She hadn't moved an inch since I started the process of moving them. I approached her slowly. It was surreal seeing a creature frozen in such an odd position. As I came up on her, I could hear a definite, but muffled, chittering. It was unlike any noise I had ever heard from a cow. What the fuck did you eat? I thought to myself. I whistled to the cow before approaching her to avoid scaring her. On a dime, the chittering ceased. The cow's left ear rose to face the sky and began to oscillate like the periscope of a submarine. I could tell that moving this one would be a challenge. I rubbed her back, attempting to calm her down. Bonding is key when establishing any sort of relationship with an animal. I had never interacted with 29 before, so we were unfamiliar with each other. Her skin felt bizarre, like clay with hide draped over it. I walked around to see her face. Her eyes were peeled open, darting around. Her mouth hung open and drooped to the side. I examined her left ear, searching for a place to reinsert her tag, but there was no piercing. I strapped a halter to 29's mouth and began to lead her. It was like trying to uproot a tree with a bike chain. Each tug that I gave was useless. I began to put my weight into it, but still, no luck. When I say no luck, I don't mean that 29 wouldn't follow me. I mean that her body shows zero sign of being affected by my body weight whatsoever. Cows are strong creatures, but they're not made of stone. I was perplexed. After 15 minutes of this, I decided that it was useless to continue on, with the clock ever ticking. I could no longer afford to neglect my rounds. I began to walk to the security post to collect my flashlight and get on with the night. I heard a slow trotting. I looked behind me to see that the cow had in fact moved. 29 was now facing me. Not so shy now, I wondered. I turned around and continued walking towards the gate. When I made it halfway through the field, I began to hear the trotting again. But this time, it was louder and much quicker. I smiled to myself. Wish I would have known to walk away sooner. Without turning to face the cow, I walked into the barn and began fumbling with 29's padlock. 3 left, 32 right, 23 left. As the lock clicked open, I heard the floorboards behind me creak. A slow, vocal noise turned to a sickly gurgle. I hope to God whatever you got isn't contagious, I said before spinning around. All color drained from my face as I was greeted with the sight of the 8-foot-tall beast standing before me. On its hind legs, its ears were flapping like a hummingbird's wings. Its head was cocked sideways with one eye focused on me. Its pupils seemed to grow and shrink as it scanned over my entire body. Its lower jaw slowly moved up and down as it began to vocalize again. It began to creep towards me. Its front legs were kicking as it attempted to keep balance, all the while making that same noise. I began to feel lightheaded. I grabbed 29's padlock and made a break for the door. That's when the cow began to stomp behind me. I began to hyperventilate as I sprinted. The rest of the cows were spooked, shaking and jumping around as well. I slammed the door shut and clasped the padlock. A sickening boom shook the entire wall of the barn as 29 began to claw at the door. Oh, 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 the beast croaked before chittering once more. I backed away from the door slowly, its wooden frame bending and contorting at the sheer force behind it. Without another warning, I turned my back to the barn and ran to my car as 29 began wailing and pounding. I never ended up making any rounds that night. Instead, I started my car and left that fucking place in the rear view mirror. I didn't even tell my boss. In fact, I avoided several of his phone calls because I had nothing to say. I figured it would be best if I just quit the easy way. There are certain things in life that back you into corners. Silence forces your hand, you know. That's why I'm writing this now. I still wanted my money. A few weeks later, just before making my 2-hour drive back to college, I stopped by the farm to pick up my final check. My boss wasn't in his office on Tuesdays, so I took advantage of the situation and granted myself access with the key that I had seen him kick under the rug once or twice. After snagging my check and a few Jolly Ranchers, I got in my car and slowly began to drive away. Out of the corner of my eye, a young farmhand standing in the grazing field caught my attention. I lowered my window and said, "Hey kid, stay away from the night shift," but he didn't answer me, nor even look at me. He just continued to stare at the pile of bones before him. As I kept driving, I kept staring at him, and he wouldn't even move an inch. That's when something struck me as odd. His head was tilted sideways, similar to 29's head. I swear, I'm never going back to that farm again. I never told this story to anyone, and I don't really intend to tell it again. I have a pounding migraine today, and this thread has kept me good company as I drifted in and out. I actually don't like talking about this time in my life. When I was around 12, I lived with my mom. We were below the poor level. We lived up in the mountains around Santa Cruz, California. My mom had a friend that owned a large bit of property up there, and he let us stay in a trailer up there. Our trailer was very small and was right beside a garden. A chain link fence ran around the garden to keep the dog the owner had out, along with other animals. All kinds of deer and things are very common in the area. Also, along the fence area was a single room. It was like a tiny house, but it was only a single room on the inside. This room had light, and since our actual trailer didn't, I spent a lot of my time in there. By the way, sorry that the story will be fairly long. I'm actually pretty bad at writing. I just want to say that first, as this will be the only time. So there's this one thing you should know right now. This small fenced-in area was only a small part of the property, but most of it was just a bunch of woods. Also, I refused to leave the fence area because the owner's dog had been mistreated by children in the past and was very sketchy towards me all the time. If I was alone, it would try to bite at me, even through the fence. The fence was tall, at least 7 feet high, and wasn't even movable. So as long as the gate was closed, I was safe. With that being said, there is no one else around us for miles and miles. Now I'm telling you all this because I think it's important that you understand what kind of scene this was before I really get into the story. So we have a fenced-in location that seems fairly safe. It contains a trailer and a single room with power that is not connected to the trailer. Nothing else around for miles. My mom's van is parked out in front of the gate to the fenced-in area, and a single unpaved road runs from this garden for about a mile to the main house. Now then, I would bring friends up there to sleep over here and there. We all thought it was pretty cool, you know. Besides, we would get our own room to stay in, to play video games all night long. It was like a dream come true. The only downside was simple. When it would get dark outside, it would get really dark. No city around, and the trailer would not be lit up. There was no bathroom to use in the room, and you would have to walk through the dark garden in order to get to the trailer to use it. Strange things would happen out here from time to time. It was always something that could be somewhat easily explained away though. Noises like people working at night, or once me and a friend were sitting out in the garden and we saw a shadow as big as a small bear bound up a tree, but the tree didn't shake like there was weight on it. The dog also creeped me out, but you know, angry dog, and I was a kid. It happens. Now, I do get scared pretty fast. I always been that way. For example, I have trouble walking through a lit house if I'm alone. My friends, however, tend to be more outgoing, just the kinds of people I get along with. This time, I had a friend over. His name was Jacob. We were staying up all night and playing Sonic the Hedgehog 3 on my Sega Genesis. We started playing as the sun went down, and by the time we were finishing up the game, it was around 2 a.m. That's when we heard it. We turned off the game, getting ready to find something else to play. There was a rumbling in the woods behind the room we were in, like somebody was rolling something really heavy around. We hadn't heard it before, because the noise from what we were playing was loud. I immediately got goosebumps. Jacob was not really worried about it, but it's not like there was someone else's house a yard right over there. It was just a forest for miles, and it sounded like someone was constructing something or some shit, dragging and rolling something really heavy. Eventually, Jacob convinced me to just play some more games. I agreed on the condition that we turn the volume down so we could hear if something happened. We started playing, and I didn't even notice that the noise had stopped because I was into the game. A couple hours later, Jacob said he had to use the bathroom. I was feeling fine by then, so so I was fine when he left to the trailer to relieve himself. He was taking a while, so eventually I decided I was gonna go check on him. Besides, I could use the bathroom and grab a snack while I was at it. I got up and opened the door to leave, and when I opened it, he was just standing at the doorway, right outside the door, facing it. It scared the shit out of me. That's when I asked what he was doing, and he just stood there, blocking the exit. I realized he must have sneaked up to the door because I could hear him walk away from the room, but I hadn't heard him walk back up to it. It was super quiet out there, without the noises of the city. I should have been able to hear, but he refused to say anything or respond. He just stood there. I told him he was really creeping me out, but it wasn't like him to try to scare me like this. Finally, I decided to just go to the trailer and use the bathroom myself. I told him what I was gonna do. Then I moved past him, but when I pushed him out of my way a little, his skin felt freezing to the touch. I jumped a little, but it was a cold night, and he had been standing out there for like 30 minutes, so I figured that was to be expected. I walked as quickly as I could over to the trailer, and that's when he followed me, like right on my tail. It was unnerving. I joked a little, saying that he already surprised me by scaring me at the door. The joke is over already. Finally, I got to the trailer and walked in. He didn't follow. He just stayed at the doorway. Now, I want you to picture this. Imagine inside a trailer with the door open in the middle of the night, and your friend is just standing outside a trailer looking in. I checked on my mom, who was fast asleep. Then I turned to go into the bathroom. It was a porta potty, and we keep the bathroom door shut because it smells bad. When I reached for the door and tried to open it though, it was locked. That's when I heard a nervous voice come from behind the door. In here. I quickly turned to look at Jacob, but the door was still open and there was nothing there but pitch black night. I froze. I would have heard the bathroom door open if he had come in behind me and gone that way. There is no way to do it quietly. That's when I just yelled out so loud that my mom woke up. I stared at the doorway, unable to bring myself to move a muscle. She got up, walked over there, and looked out. Not seeing anything, she closed the door and asked me what was wrong. By now, Jacob was coming out of the bathroom and acting perfectly normal, but just a little bit confused. I explained what happened, and Jacob said he was just taking a long time in the bathroom, basically. None of them believed me at all, no matter how much I insist. My mom is sure that I just got sleepy and imagined it, and Jacob thought I was trying to prank him. So my mom gets out a big flashlight and walks us back to the room. She tells us to go to sleep, then she leaves and goes back to the bed herself. Now, this room doesn't have any windows or anything, so after a while, I calm back down a little bit. I'm telling myself that my mom was right. It must have been like a waking dream or something. Meanwhile, Jacob insists that he was in the bathroom the whole time, and I'm inclined to believe him, because there is just no way to really get around without being heard. So I settled down, but I'm a little rattled, but I'm thinking that I can just sleep it off throughout the night. Suddenly, the dog starts going nuts, right behind us. The room is up against the fence, so the dog must have been like right behind the room on the other side. I guess when the dog started going nuts, I got scared, because Jacob started laughing at me and said, "The dog barking at a squirrel or some shit, and you're over here shitting yourself." It keeps going like that for a long time though. Suddenly, the barking stops and gets replaced by whimpering. We hear the dog run away. There's about 45 seconds of silence before we hear something new. A small stretching sound on the back wall of the room. We both try to be silent as we can. Eventually, it stops. After 5 or so minutes of silence, Jacob decides to be brave. He decides that he's gonna wake up my mom to tell her something crazy is going on. I wish he wouldn't leave me alone, but there's absolutely no way I'm gonna go out there. He arms himself as best as he can with a tennis racket we had in the room with us. Then he takes a couple small steps and opens the door and dashes out. I close it as quick as I can behind him. In less than 30 seconds, I hear a scream. Not long after, the door flies open, and he comes back in looking pale as a ghost. He looks tired and his breathing is like he just ran a marathon. His eyes look as big as dinner plates. I then ask what is going on like 4 times before he finally starts getting words out. He tells me he walked out there and he was walking through the garden as quick as he could, and then he saw my mom just standing there. He tried to talk to her, but she stared at him with a blank expression. Getting super creeped out because of what happened to me earlier, he took a couple more steps towards her, telling her that he thought something was in the woods. Suddenly, her face turned to an awkward smile. Then he realized something terrible. He hadn't noticed sooner because of the darkness. She was on the other side of the fence. Now, the door to this room does not lock, and as I explained earlier, this room had no windows. As he is telling me what happened, he is also at the same time putting stuff in front of the door, and by the end, I was helping him. In retrospect, whatever was harassing us seemed to not want to actually enter the room or the trailer, because the Jacob one didn't come into the room or to the trailer itself. Either way, we stacked everything we could against the door, thinking somehow, like in cartoons, this would actually definitely keep the creature out. So for the rest of the night, we heard scratches coming from all around the room. I, of course, ended up crying. Jacob looked like his mind had left his body with fear. At one point, whatever was out there was speaking as well. I heard it from right next to me where I was resting against the wall, in my mother's low voice, the same exact phrasing she had used earlier in the night. "What's wrong?" Followed by, "Go to sleep." The sun must have come up eventually. The scratching as well stopped. We heard my mom come to get us. This time, we actually heard footsteps. We of course refused to leave the room. My mom had to go get the property owner and have him take the door off. When we saw that it was actually her, I burst into tears again. We never had any experiences like these again, and we eventually moved away. But that one night still haunts me. I still refuse to go out at night unless I'm with a bunch of people, and I will never, ever live in the woods again. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed hearing about this, as I probably won't tell the story again. Thanks for listening. I've been sitting on the story for a while. I haven't spoken a word of it to any of my buddies in fear of ridicule, but I see so many people sharing stories about their experience in the woods, and I think I have a pretty good one. Not in a bragging sense, but something different than the normal. I came across something in the woods while hiking or camping overnight, especially given our situation and what actually happened. A long time ago, I did a survival training course with the Army, where you learned everything that you need to know in order to live in the woods for an extended period of time, especially if you down your aircraft. The course covered everything from wild edibles to signaling overhead aircraft for help. Maybe you heard of it. Seer School. It was broken into 4 different phases, with the hardest being the field phase, which also included the final test. And like everything else in life, you learn it first in the classroom, go through some training, and then comes the real test, simulation. By the way, I am now in my late 60s. I've been through hell and back since then. I dealt with just about everything life throws at you. Divorce, losing your parents, having your kids and your grandkids, who are now all grown and don't want to come see you or even talk to you. And I'll tell you right now, none of that pain or fear compares to that week in those woods. Or maybe, now that I think about it, maybe I just haven't dealt with it after this long. Because honestly, writing this is making me feel a certain way. In a positive way, that is. So we were to hike 10 miles into the woods. We were to find a clearing and set up camp. Sounds pretty easy, right? Think again. You have to do this with nothing but a combat knife, fuel rations, and a very basic med kit for 5 nights. This was no camping in the woods field trip. You would have to do this on your own, and that's what made it so brutal. There was no help, no backup plan. You were dropped off miles away from anyone else and told, see you in 5 days at the extraction point. There was no satellite phone, no radio, nothing. It wasn't like, if I hear something crawling outside at night, or if I see something standing at the tree line, I'll just pack up and leave. You couldn't leave. There was no exit, no ranger station down the trail. It wasn't some weekend camping trip where you could just leave if things got too scary. This was basically stay there and survive. If the forest went dead silent at night, you stayed. If you heard footsteps circling your shelter, you stayed. If you did see something from the tree line, you stayed. That was the whole point of the exercise, to get you down to the basics and force you to rely on nothing but your training. You had no one to talk to, just the woods around you. And every time that the sun set, the dreaded night would come. You were by yourself. To top everything off, we were told that because of an incident last year with somebody not being able to handle the pressure of being alone in the woods, the combination of loneliness, being bored, and sometimes the creepy thoughts that you aren't going to be rescued, can take even the most confident outdoorsman mad. We were told to remove our belts and leave them at base. Basically, somebody hanged themselves last year. It was weird given that we could still have our combat knives. But hey, that's the army for you. So we drove up to our location. We were each given a specific grid and some numbers showing the extraction point for each of us. Each of them were at least 5 miles away from any other person. We were given directions to hike to our location. Mine was almost an 8-mile hike through wooded marshland. Everything was important, because that's where we would be picked up after the 5 nights. So I got my bearings, planned out what I was going to do for a shelter, and I settled in for my 5-night stay there, completely by myself. Since the weather was good and it was only 5 nights, and I figured I would focus more on the food and water collection. Water wasn't hard to find. There was a stream just outside of my camp. I put all my effort that first day into setting traps to catch some small game, pitfalls, rabbit snares, and deadfall traps. I figured that if I'm going to set some traps, I may as well set something to catch me a deer. Basically, I bent a strong tree branch back and attached sharp spears to it connected to a tripwire system. I was very proud of my work. It would have definitely taken down a medium-sized deer. Everything was pretty uneventful the first few nights. Aside from hearing wolves howling in the distance, it was quiet. For the first time in my life, I heard nothing but the sound of the woods. Everything was going well, except shit hit the fan on the 3rd night when I heard the swing trap go off. It made a hell of a noise when it hit the tree beside it, which was actually discouraging. It meant that it didn't hit the target. I woke up that morning late in the day. The sun was already high in the sky. The first thing on my mind was to check my small game traps. I hadn't had anything to eat since the 2nd night, and the only thing on my belly was water. I went over to reset the swing trap, and that's when I saw something strange. There was blood on one of the spears. The wound must have been deep. The blood covered the first 2 inches of the spear. I then noticed something strange near the trap. What looked like some sort of print. Some animal or human footprint. I hadn't taken my boots off outside the shelter, and there's nobody around for miles. I then start feeling a bit uneasy, knowing that maybe someone is around and wounded. What was weird is that there was no trail of blood to follow, especially with a wound of that size. If it was a person, the trap would have hit him square in the hip. I decided to return back to my camp, and I snacked on some nearby cucumber leaves. It's a leaf plant that tastes like cucumber. A wave of guilt washes over me, thinking about the blood and what it must have been. What if I killed an innocent person, or maybe some hermit living on these woods? But I was given strict instructions not to go more than 200 feet outside my grid bubble. I forgot to mention that I'm not sure how true or feasible this is, but they told us that there would also be role players who camouflage themselves and check on us just to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to. And then, about an hour later, I hear a helicopter circle overhead for about 5 minutes. It lands about a mile or 2 away from me, and then it just leaves very quickly. They must have been picking up my victim or something. The fortnight was quiet. No sound of bugs, no wolves in the distance, no wind, nothing. It was the closest thing to silence that I ever heard. Out of nowhere, every hair on my body stands on end, almost like the air around me was electricity. I felt like somebody was watching me, not just that uneasy feeling you get when you're alone in the woods. I didn't just feel, I knew that somebody was watching me. A quick gust of wind blew over my shelter. The air was freezing cold. I could see my own breath. That's when the deer trap goes off again. It doesn't hit the tree this time. I'm scared. I'm not leaving the shelter to investigate. Fuck that. Suddenly, something breaks the silence. Somebody coughing, but it was unlike anything I ever heard a person make before. It was almost mechanical, almost like the voice of someone with the electronic voice box. There was a cough every 2 seconds or so. The coughing was the only sound. There was no background noises from the woods. I then built up the courage to look through the entrance of my shelter to see what is making that noise. When I look, just outside is a foot with jeans around the ankle. I'm petrified. That's when I heard it. A voice, low, hoarse. It said my name. Frozen in fear, I didn't respond. I didn't say anything. And then it said my name again. My whole body felt locked in place. And then came that cough again. The same mechanical, rough cough. I was frozen. I didn't say anything. I didn't move. Then it sounded like someone kneeling down, right at the entrance of my shelter. I didn't move. But then it spoke again. More clear this time. You know what you did to me. Whoever, or whatever this was, started laughing. But it didn't sound human. It then said, I know you didn't mean to, but I still need you to come out. At this point I wanted to scream, but I couldn't say anything. That's when I started hearing some scraping sounds, something dragging on the dirt. Then came the sniffing, the smelling sounds. At this point I just closed my eyes, and then it said something that I will never forget. I'll see you again next time. Not even sure how I fell asleep. I think my whole body just shut down from the fear. For the next day and night, I ended up staying in my shelter, too afraid of whatever was out there to leave. I was woken the 6th day by my sergeant. It was past noon, on the hike back to base. I did ask him about the helicopter, and he told me not to worry about it. I let it go for about 10 minutes before asking again. He noticed that I was concerned. It was a body recovery. Captain J hung himself with a rope that he made. You were friends, right? He asked me like he knew the answer was yes. But then he handed me a small note. It was a paper, at least what looked to be one, the size of a sticky note. It said, "Hey man, I tracked him to your site. I know I shouldn't have, but I did." He kept coughing and whispering in some foreign tongue that I never heard before, but somehow I could understand. He wanted somebody. He told me to do this to save you. The man with black eyes wanted you. When we got back to base, everything was confusing. They pulled me aside right away. I was escorted to a small room with 2 officers and a notepad. They started asking questions. Did you see him? Did you hear him? Did anyone come close to your camp? What do you remember each night? I told them everything that I could remember. And yes, even the coughing, the cold air, the print that I found outside of my shelter. They grilled me for hours. Had I broken grid and wandered outside my zone? Did I see anyone else in the woods? Could I confirm that the cough came from Captain J? I couldn't give him anything solid. All I knew was that someone or something was out there. After that, I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. He told me the official report listed Captain J's death as a mental health breakdown during survival training, but everyone else in my unit were talking about something else. There's shit out there in the dark that we don't know about, and that we don't need to go looking for. You see, I've been in the woods my whole life. I never personally seen all the monsters and shit that people say that they came across, but I am a firm believer in the gift that we have, the gift to perceive whether somebody is watching us. I read about 1,000 stories about the woods and what people had came across, and 100% of these stories always mention something about feeling of being watched, and you'll also hear that in pretty much any recounting of a dangerous situation, whether it's paranormal or something else. If anything, humans are really good at knowing when something or someone is tracking us. So I'll leave you with this. Never discount that feeling on the back of your neck as anything other than your body saying, "Hey, watch the fuck out. Something is trying to eat us." You know that feeling when you wake up in the middle of the night and you don't even know why? You're just laying there, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out why you're awake. Then you hear it. You ignore it. Don't pay no attention to it. Isn't that what our parents told us? Maybe you're laying in bed right now, relaxing. Maybe sitting there, scrolling on your phone. I have something to share that might just make you think twice next time you hear something. My friend told me the creepiest thing I ever heard, and now I just want to share this with you. It's nothing paranormal, by the way. At least I don't think it is. So maybe it's not scary, or maybe it is, depending on how you take it. So at some point, my friend, I will call him Mark, he had came back to the rest to visit. He had now become a city boy, but his family still lived out here. So when he came to visit his family, he would actually stay at his friend's house over the weekend, including my house sometimes here and there. On one Saturday morning, he came over to my place early. He was knocking. He said if he could spend the weekend with me, which I found strange. He would always let me know ahead of time, and I thought he made plans to spend the weekend with someone else. He told me that he did, but he decided not to after what happened last night at his friend's house. Not only did he say that, he seemed scared about it. I'm like, what the fuck? What happened? Mark told me that when he decided to spend the weekend at his friend's place, which he had already spent there a few times before, his friend's grandma also stayed there, but she had been in the hospital for some time now, so the home was pretty much vacant, which is why he would stay there, because it was only them. So when Friday night came, another weekend, he got his stuff and went over to his friend's home. He said that when he got there, well, let me describe the home for you, which is important. I also gone over a few times. I just wasn't that close to him. To my friend Mark I was, but not to the other guy. and the only times I went over was whenever our little original Resi clique hanged out together. So if I remember, you walk in through the front door, and right away you're standing in the living room. No entryway, just straight into the living room. To the left in the corner was this small kitchen area. It had a stove, a small fridge, and a desk as a counter. I'm sure everything was DIY or something. The living room, on each end, or wall, was a door. There were 2 bedrooms. One belonged to his friend, the other to his grandma. But like I said, Mark would stay over at grandma's room, since, she wasn't living there. The rooms, they faced each other, directly, separated only by the living room in the middle, and at the opposite of the main door, across the living room, there was a door that led out to the yard. Mark said that when he got there he was excited, because it was going to be another weekend of just hanging out, drinking and having a good time. When he walked into the home, he heard a noise coming from grandma's room. So he ended up asking his friend who else was there, and that's when his friend told him that his grandma was back from the hospital. However, she was real sick, bedridden, hooked up to a machine. She couldn't move around at all. She stayed in bed all day. She couldn't go nowhere because she had no legs, and she was just getting weaker. Now Mark told me that he also didn't mind helping his friend's grandma around as well, almost like a payback for letting him stay over, especially since she was wheelchair bound. With that said, they went outside, hanged out, played some video games, and they ended up watching a movie. They bought dinner, and by the time they went to bed, it was around 2 a.m. He said he remembers waking around 3 or 4, just randomly, but he woke up real thirsty, so he decided to go get a drink of water. It was dark, and he said grandma's room door was wide open, just like his friend kept his bedroom door open, which something was wrong as his friend needed to hear in case she needed help or something. He said he got the water, and he was walking back into the room when he heard a noise, a quick tapping noise behind him. He said he stopped for a moment, looked around, and nothing, so he assumed it was the machines hooked up to grandma. So right when he was gonna walk back into the room, he turned around. He heard the sound again, a bit closer though, like right behind him. He turned around. That's when he saw her, the silhouette of grandma running on her hands back to her room. My friend said that he got so scared that he quickly walked into his friend's room and shut the door. Now remember, his friend told him to keep the doors open in case she called out to them so that they could hear. Well, he tried to wake up his friend, but he was dead asleep, like snoring away. Even tried shaking him awake. Must have been too much drinking. Mark told me that if he could, he would have left right there and then, in the middle of the night. But what if that's just how she walks now to get around? He said hell no, fuck that. So he just laid down on the floor and didn't even go back to sleep. He said he was just up all night, waiting to see if anything happened. And sure enough, something did. The door to the bedroom opened, very slowly. By this time he said he was so scared that he was just waiting for her to walk in, on her hands. So he went over to his friend and started shaking him awake and explained everything. He said that his friend was confused and walked with him to the living room. They looked at grandma's room, and she's sitting on the bed with her hair down. His friend told him that that's what she does, but that she can't be walking, and that he must have been dreaming. Mark even told me that his friend started laughing at him, and for the rest of the night, or morning, he couldn't go back to sleep. After the sun rose, Mark and his friend got up. His friend took him to grandma's room, and she was laying there hooked up to a machine. That was the last time Mark went back to his friend's house. I'm not sure what to think about it. Maybe she used her hands as her feet and only moved around at night. Maybe she knew it would freak everyone out, seeing her go around the house that way. Maybe her time was nighttime to get things done. But that still doesn't make fucking sense. She would have to be strong to walk around like that. We did end up telling somebody else about it, And she told us that maybe it's her spirit running around and to not be scared. I'm not sure how to feel about this. What do y'all think? And so like I said earlier, you should never sweep at night. Some rules just have to be learned the hard way. I'll explain what happens in a second. But first, let me tell you what happened right after those knocks in the middle of the night. After the cousin decided to sweep, we panicked. I'm not sure how she could see, or maybe she was there with us the whole time. But I swear they have like a sixth sense for these type of things, because Grandma yelled from the room again, "Don't open that door. Lay back down and don't say a word." We laid there frozen. The sound outside didn't stop. It sounded like somebody was sweeping. Maybe I was just paranoid and just confused this with the sound of footsteps. But at some point it did sound like somebody was dragging something. Every now and then, we would also hear the footsteps. My cousin whispered to me, but I told him to be quiet. I didn't want Grandma to hear, and I didn't want whatever that was outside to hear us. After what felt like hours, it finally got quiet. No sounds, no noises, just the sound of the wind outside. But not one of us closed our eyes for that night. Well, maybe for a few minutes, because in the morning, Grandma was already in the kitchen counter doing something, making a bunch of noise. She didn't even say good morning. She grabbed her smudge bowl, lit the cedar, and walked straight over to us. She smudged me and my cousin, saying some things under her breath in Navajo the whole time. Sitting there like you didn't do nothing wrong. You two think you're cute, huh? Sweeping at night, acting like smartasses. Now look what you brought. Next time they come knocking, I swear I'm gonna open that door myself and drag your asses out there. I'll let them know it was all on you. When she finished with the smudge, she looked at us again and said, "You think I made up these rules? You think I just like yelling at y'all? This is why I tell you, don't sweep at night." But no, you don't listen. Now look at you. You went and brought it right to the door. We just stood there quiet. After that day, me and my cousin never spoke about this again. A few years ago, I did ask my grandma again. And the only reason why is because I used to tell my friends the same thing she told us growing up. Don't sweep at night. Some of them said that they never heard of it before, while others said that they had never understood why. By now we were much older. I sat down with Grandma one night, and after some small talk and just having a good time, I did ask her, and what she said made perfect sense to me now. First she was like, "So now your hard-headed self still wants to know, huh?" She shook her head and chuckled. "All these years, and you still can't let it go. Alright, sit down. I'll tell you. When you sweep away the negative. We know these things. But never, never sweep at night. And never sweep out the door. Back then, in the old hogans, the floors were dirt. People would sweep the inside towards the center and out through the doorway in the mornings to start fresh for the day. But at night, you never swept out the door or took out the trash. It's all tied together. Hair might be in that pile. The bad spirits can use it. They take it and put some bad medicine on you. Even one little strand, just one. That's all it takes. Don't be stupid. You hear me? Never leave clothes hanging out at night. Don't leave the dirty dishes out at night. Nothing goes outside that is personal, belonging to you, because they can take it and use it against you. They are you know who. Well, y'all stay safe and leave those brooms alone at night.